This video will be going over batch transactions. A batch transaction is used to group unposted transactions together to post at a later date. We will be going over two options on how to create batch transactions. To access the batch transaction screen, you'll go to Processes and Batch Transactions. One way we can create a batch transaction is to go down to the bottom of the screen and click New. Here you can write in a comment of what this batch is going to be. If it is a monthly payments, if it's monthly bills, if it's a one-time payment, whatever those types of comments you need to refer back to the batch. So for an example, we'll just say first of the month. So this will be my first of the month payments that I'm going to put in this batch. If I have particular users that have to post this batch or normally process batches, I can put their name in. So I can just put in a name. I can put in the admin does this batch. And if this batch is a recurring that you do every single month, that you will want to continue to see every single month, you'll want to check recurring. If it is a batch that would not reoccur, that you're going to use a one-time only, you would not check recurring. So I'm going to say OK. This is going to add it to my batch list. This is the date that I have created my batch, and this is who's going to be processing the batch. You do not have to put a user. It is optional. I'm going to go ahead and start adding transactions to the batch, and then we'll come back and go over the options of these buttons at the bottom and the options at the top here. So we're going to do payments. So we can go into Processes, Purchases, and Payments. And for an example, I'm just going to say Office Depot. And we are going to say $25 at Office Depot for my office supplies account. And up here at the top, I'm going to want to use my magnifying glass and find my batch. So here is my batch right here. And I'm going to say yes. If you do not see any of your recurring batches, you can right-click here and unhide your recurring batches. Currently, mine are not hidden. So if I want to hide them, I can click Hide. My recurring batch that we just had is not here. If I want to unhide them, I'm going to right-click and display recurring batches. So this is my recurring batch right there. When I save this, if I want this particular check to print down at the bottom, I do want to make sure that I choose that I do want it to print. If it needs to be added to an ACH file, I need to choose that option as well. And say OK. If I don't choose this, we can edit it later. When I add it to the batch, it is going to save. It is not going to post. Since I'm adding it to a batch, it does not affect any of my accounts at this time. So I'm going to save it. Then I'm going to create another one for, we'll say Midwest Plumbing, and we'll say the plumber came out and did some work. And I'm going to put this under General. And up here, it already still has that batch up there. If I needed to go to a different batch, I could change it at that time, but I do still want it to go to this batch. So then I'm going to press Save. And we'll just do one more. And for the post office, we'll say that we bought some stamps. So the first two checks I did not say I'm going to print, but this last check I am going to check to print. So this is the only check that will print. And if I press Save, it is not going to print now. It is going to post to this batch. I'm going to close out of this batch transaction screen. Right here, I'm going to close back out of this screen. We'll go back into it. If we go to Processes, batch transactions. Right now, here is my monthly batch. If I go down here and edit this batch, it's going to let me edit the username. So if I need a new username that I want to then now process this batch, they can change it. If it is no longer recurring, I can uncheck this if it's going to be now just a one-time deal. Or if I want to change the name, I can then change it at this time and it will then update up here. So we'll just say first month just to show you. And now my comment is the first of the month or first month. If I copy this batch will copy with all the other transactions that are in this current batch, which we have currently 3. So if I press copy here, I am copying it, and we're just going to say monthly, and I'm going to change this to John, and we're going to say okay. So now I have 2 of them out there. We will look at the first one that I had created, and I am going to go in and view the transactions up here under transaction activity. These are my current transactions that are in this batch. They have not posted to any of my accounts because I had put them in a batch. If I did not put them in a batch, they would affect your accounts, but they were saved to a batch. So in here, these are all of my transactions. If I need to go in and edit any of these, I can double click on this transaction here. I can change this account to, we'll say, administration. And save it. It was postage. If I go back in, it is changed, and this will be the current settings going forward. If I need to change who this gets paid to, I can go in here. I can go up to the vendor and change the vendor to whoever I would like it to be changed to. So we'll say it's going to go to a MasterCard. And I do not want to clear the transaction. I want it to keep it the same. I'm just changing my vendor. Now it is now changed to the MasterCard. When I am ready to post my batch, I would press post down here. I would choose the date, and this is going to be the date for all of the checks. So if I want to go and say we're going to post it for the first of the month, so we're going to say 5/1/2021 and say okay. This is now going to post my batch. And I'm going to go ahead and print that check. And it was one check I asked it to print, so the other 2 just posted to the accounts, and this one will print a check for me. If I have a particular way I would like these checks to print, because I am going to be printing multiple checks, in this situation I only printed 1, but if I have a particular way I would like these checks to print, I can click this print order down here and choose. If I want it to print in the abbreviation, I am going to move it over to this side, and then this will print in the abbreviation order that I have on these names up here. You can choose any of these options, and then it will print in that order for you after you press OK. We'll go on to reports. You do have some options of reports to view what is going on in the batches. We have an accounts payable prepayment report. If you are choosing accounts payable as an option, there are multiple screens that you can do batches on. For this example, we're only doing the payment screen, but there's a posted batch right here. So we can choose the date of that batch, which I did choose 5/1. Or I can just choose the batch. Now these are multiple batches that were in here that were once deleted, but I can also just choose this batch right here and move it over. And then I can preview my posted batch. And it could be that I had the date off, so let me just move this out. I apologize. I'm changing it to all dates and I'm looking specifically for the batch. Here we go. So here is my batch, and it was because I actually created the batch on 4/28/2021. That's what the date it was looking for. So here's my batch. It's showing me that I posted this batch. So these have affected all of the accounts that were currently on those payment screens. I do have an unposted batch that is currently sitting out there at this time. And I can then go ahead and look at if it is recurring or not recurring, it doesn't matter, but I can then preview this here. And I do have, this one can be posted again, and this one is not posted. So it will show those here for you. This is the detail of those unposted batch transactions. So if we preview this as well, let me go back into the batch that I might want. So let's go to the one that says John here. This is showing me all the accounts of the unposted batch transaction. Some customers do use this because they have updated certain accounts and they want to be able to change the accounts that are on the batches. So they have to go in and change the accounts like we just did previously, and I can show you again. So that is the first way that you can add transactions to a batch or create a batch. The second way that you would create a batch is if we go into Processes, Purchases, and Payments. Up in the corner, you can actually go and right-click and say New. This is the entry to begin a batch transaction. We can go and then create one that says End of Month. And we'll put the user as Amy. And we're going to say it's a recurring batch. Now I can go in and type in the transactions that I would like to put for the end of month. So for this example, we're going to say that we have a John Deere payment for the end of the month. And we're going to do farm supplies. And this is going to save it to the batch. For this example, I'm going to say that this is going to be printed. And I'm going to save it. And then we're going to go in here and we're going to say tractor supply. And we're going to do other expense. And I'm going to say we're going to save it. Excuse me, we're going to print it. I apologize. These have then been saved to this batch. To then verify that that batch exists, we can go to Processes, Batch Transactions, and here's the batch that I just created. I'm going to view the transactions by going to Transaction Activity. And these are the two transactions here that are in Transaction Activity. I can then double click on here if I don't want this check to print and uncheck it and say don't print and then save it so that check will not print. I can then go here to John Deere and say I do not want to save this check or have this check print and say the amount changed of my end of the month payment to $660.23. Oops. And then I can save this. So this will update to my new amount. As you see, it did right up there. Before I post this batch, I want to view it. So I'm going to go into my reports like I did over here, my transaction reports and my batch transactions. I want to view the detail of the unposted batch. So I'm going to do my batch at the top over here. I'm going to move out the monthly and move over the end of the month batch that I wanted to view. I do want to see this in detail, my level of detail, and I'm going to preview it. So this is my batch before I actually go ahead and post it. It's telling me what accounts it's hitting, my debits and credits, so I know what accounts will be affected once this batch has been posted. Now I'm going to go back into my transaction activity I'm going to go down to the bottom and say, if this was to print, we could say we're going to have a particular print order. I did take off the printing option, but if I did want it to have a print order, I would then move it over here like we did on the other batch, the same thing, and then say, okay. Right now I'm going to post the batch, and I'm going to choose the end of the month. So we're going to say the 30th. We'll say okay. Now this batch has been posted. I can show you that in transaction search that on 4/30 that these two transactions for John Deere and for Tractor Supply are there and they have been posted. So we will go now to the transaction search screen so we can actually look up those transactions. So under processes, transaction search, at the top of my screen, I'm going to put in the date, which you do actually already see it there, but I will just, in case you had a lot of entries in, when your database, you would be able to put up the date. So 4/30/2021. And if I search, these are the two transactions that were posted for the end of the month recurring batch that I had created. Now I'm going to go back to the open window. If, for example, this particular end of month that says Amy on it no longer needs to be recurring, you can uncheck this box here. Once we post this, this batch actually will remove itself. And I will show you that. We can actually post from this screen as well if you do not need to actually view the transactions. We can press post on this open batches screen. So you can post from the original date, or you can post all transactions in this batch with the same transaction date. This is completely up to the user. So I am going to go ahead and post with the original date as this is not a recurring batch, so then this will disappear once I press post. If I wanted to post this with a future date, say it was supposed to affect next month's books, I could go ahead and check mark this and then change it to next month. Now the recurring batch is gone. The non-recurring batch is gone. I apologize. We did make that a non-recurring batch. Now this right here is a recurring batch. If I needed to get rid of it because we are no longer doing the monthly batches or the first of the month batch, we can then go in here and press delete. And this does remove that recurring batch from your list of batches. So we are going to add in another batch here. So I'm going to go up to the top. I'm going to say new. And we're just going to call it a mid-month. I'm not going to put a user, and I'm going to call it as it's recurring. And then I'm going to say OK. And I'm going to put in Office Depot again. And some office supplies. And I'm going to save this. And then we're going to do one other transaction, and we'll do the US Post Office again. And we'll say for postage. And save it. We're going to go back to the batch transaction screen. You can get it here from your open windows, or you can go back under processes and batch transactions. And we might need to refresh the screen, so you can right click and refresh. And there is the mid-month batch that I just created. And again, to get that on there, if the screen was already open, I just right clicked and I pressed refresh. You do have also options to add or remove columns. It doesn't look like you have many more options, but you can add an entry system or a last posted, but this is normally the default. If, for an example, I want to go into my mid-month, open this up, and then, like I said before, change this. I can change it to print. If after you have gone in here and changed the changes you wanted to make on this batch, and then on this entry, and then you realize it's in the wrong batch, that this is actually not a mid-month entry, it actually is supposed to go to a different batch, you can actually right-click on the entry like I just did and say change batch, and then you can go here and then add it to, say, your monthly batch and say okay. Monthly will display here. If we say okay, that entry has now been removed from the mid-month and has been now added to your monthly batch. So I will go back and check that out. So we're going to go back to the Open Batches screen. I'm going to go back to monthly. Excuse me, I'm going to go back to monthly. And then I have now 2 US postage transactions on my monthly transaction. If this Midwest Plumbing should have actually been a mid-month, I can right-click, change my batch, search what batch I needed to go to, which I only have the option of mid-month, say OK again. Now this has now been moved to my mid-month batch. I'll go back to my open batches, open my mid-month, excuse me, again, and then there is my Midwest Plumbing. Just as an overview of what we went over in this video, we went over the 2 options of how to add batches to CenterPoint. The overview is to go over where the batches can be added, which is on the batch transaction screen under processes, batch transactions, and then creating new at the bottom, or on the screen in this example of payments, so processes, purchases, and payments. Under the current batch in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, you right-click and say New and create your batch there. We've also gone over in the video how to edit your batch, delete your batch, post your batch, move your transaction to a different batch, view your batches, and to view the reports in the batch, and determine how you would want to print these batches.